What is up, guys, and welcome to the very first episode of the Next Level Esports Podcast, the number one podcast about esports coaching and team development to help you and your team reach that next level by getting the people side of esports right. Today, I have the pleasure to talk with Josh Furneaux, where we will talk about his 7 years of experience as an esports coach. Josh is current the League of Legends player agent for ICM Stellar and former LEC head coach of Excel, as well having years of experience with coaching esports teams. With so many years of experience and being with interesting teams, I'm certain that we will get some golden nuggets and good stories from the podcast. How are you doing today, Josh?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Cool. Thank you so much for being here and spending some time to spread your golden nuggets with the esports community. So, just to straight jump into the conversation, to start off, so you've been a coach for a lot of years, but now you are a player agent. Can you tell us a little bit what you do as a player agent?
Sure. So, as a player agent, I guess the term that best describes collectively what I do is more of a player career manager, whereas obviously teams have managers for their teams. I'm more sign players to our agency and then manage these players' careers throughout the duration of whatever team they're on. Really, that kind of entails stuff like negotiating best possible contracts for them and ensuring that those terms are just not biased in one way or another to the team or to the player and actually favourable. To try and seek out best possible team offers for my current players. To give career advice. I even do a little bit of coaching on the side of the players, obviously with my kind of expertise being as a coach. They can always come to
Right.
me outside of their current team, and I do a bit of coaching with the players individually. Um, really, I'm kind of just the person there that's experienced the industry that they're now getting into, and trying to ensure that they make best of the opportunities that come their way, and also increase the amount of opportunities that come their way, to best secure them the career path that they desire. And obviously, there's their side of it as well, where they need to put in the hard work and they need to do their thing to get to where they want to. But I really believe that both myself and then with the backing of ICM Stellar can really support very talented upcoming players to really make something special of the duration that they have as an esports professional.
Yeah, cool. So what I notice is that at least obviously with the growth of esports, more of these player agencies are popping up, and sometimes you hear good stories as well. But sometimes, like within the community, it's more, let's say, what I hear of sometimes a bit of hardship, like oh they want the best out of it, etc. But I
Sure.
believe, for me personally, that it's a good step forward to professionalize the whole scene, like to take it offer seriously. And all, sometimes I hear also, let's say, organizations are not paying, or like they have a shady let's say
Yeah.
history, etc. What are your experience of that with like the voices of the community, and how you are experiencing it from ICM Stellar?
Yeah, I mean, I never had an agent myself throughout my actual coaching career, and knowing what I know now about agents and like the good agents, I'm sure there's bad agents. I mean, I haven't directly come across any myself. I have come across times in my career where having an agent in hindsight would have been brilliant for the
Mm,
situations I faced. But I really think that yeah, I mean, I think my initial step into becoming an agent, I was a bit wary because you do hear some of these stories like it's all about what the agent can get out of the deal or how much the agency
right.
can get,
Yeah.
and they're just like soaking up players' salaries and kind of getting money off other people's successes. But ultimately, I don't think that that's the case with at least agencies that are professional and that are doing things right. I think in esports we have, with it being kind of that you're not really gate kept to there's no real qualification to get into the industry as a player, as a coach, as an agent, as a team manager,
Right.
as an org
Right.
owner, and without that kind of that vetting system that you perhaps get in other industries, you do get people with the utmost professionalism to the completely opposite end, where there are very unprofessional people in esports. There are people that are all there for a quick buck or whatever. They can get what they want out of it. Um, but it's really deciphering those and not branding all of a type. the same. Whether that's coaches, I'm sure that there's plenty of coaches that are not really up to the job that they've been that they've been kind of assigned with, and same with agents, same with team managers.
Yeah.
And I've come across some of these in the past that are just not capable at that point in their careers of managing the job that they're doing, and or they're there just with ill intentions or wrong intentions. And I think it's wrong of anyone to brand everyone with the same the same branding. You know what I mean? If there's a bad agent, that doesn't mean all agents
Yeah.
are bad. If there's a bad coach, doesn't mean all coaches are bad, and vice versa. I think it's really deciphering what you believe an agent should add to your career or add to a player's career. For us, for ICM Stellar, they're a huge agency in traditional sports. I mean, they're the biggest football agency in the world, and one of the top sports agencies in the world. There is nothing for ICM Stellar to gain out of any kind of shadiness within the esports space or anything like that. It really, and to be honest, even monetary value right now, ICM Stellar makes thousands times more money in traditional sports than it does in esports, but it
Right.
sees the growth and the potential of esports, and there would be no gain to ICM Stellar um, in any way to be any kind of underhand movements. It's really above board professional, learnt from kind of 30 years of experience of doing this within traditional sports and now bringing that into esports, and looking where there's crossover, looking where there's perhaps different ways to approach it because the esports ecosystem is different from traditional sports, and really understanding what what does a career path, a desirable career path look like for an esports player, whether that's in League of Legends or something like Fortnite, for instance. Particularly deal with League of Legends. There's a
Okay.
team of us in the esports department that deal with all various different things, commercial deals to other games, Fortnite players and Rocket League players and such. But yeah, I mean, in reality, I think good agencies have a huge amount to add in providing some of that vetting service for a player and to allow the player to focus on being the best possible player that they can be while there's someone with advice and like knowledge and experience about the industry that can kind of do the other bits for you and take a little bit of weight off your shoulders of managing paperwork, managing kind of negotiating contracts, um,
Right.
knowledge about orgs that may be trying to talk to you, and a bit of vetting on that side to ensure that these orgs aren't, there's no kind of shady deals going on. And really, there's various things in contracts that I'm sure we'll probably get into at some point about what termination clauses look like. There's a lot of players that are just dropped because of bad performance, but there's no real knowledge of what bad performance is.
Exactly.
I mean, a
There are
player's
no
off form for a
metrics
bit.
or no,
That
not just a
there's no, yeah,
feeling or they don't fit into
absolutely.
the group. Yeah.
Or it's just an excuse possibly for the team doesn't want that player on the team anymore. So part of my job is for instance, I don't know, my clients to ensure that that termination clause is actually not biased completely towards the team, and the team can't just put my player out of a job instantly
Yeah.
for the sake of nothing. Of course, if that player happened to be extremely harmful to the team, or I don't know, let's say racist or homophobic or something like that, of
Yeah.
course the team has every right to remove my player from that team. But just to be like, this player's not playing very well at the moment, goodbye. And now you, because it is ultimately, when you go into full-time esports, it is a job, it is a career, and it, in very few other industries, you're all of a sudden one day working, earning money, next day you don't know where your next bit of money's coming from, and that's a scary thing if it is your only source of income.
Yeah.
So to put in place termination clauses, for instance, and again, just an example of some of the types of things we do, to ensure
Do
that,
you
yeah,
also yeah, excuse me,
no, you're right,
excuse, I'm just let's say of the players, like I feel like there's now a sort of with what you are doing with the player agency, it's like super professional, and I believe why other players or teams sometimes, let's say, push a little bit against it, like they have this resistance, like, oh, they want the money or whatever. They don't really understand, and they feel too comfortable with the gaming aspect, like just to have
sure,
fun. Why does it have to be so professional? Like, and but we have to let's say go there eventually to help them, because this is, let's say, day to day, like things that are happening in traditional sports, as you see.
yeah,
But we need to move there, and we are moving there at a more rapid pace than we might, let's say, think.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the same as going down the park with your friends after school or whatever, and playing football with your mates in the park and kicking the ball around or whatever, and having fun. To it becoming an actual career, and you still get to play the game, you still get to play football in that particular instance, but there's stuff you don't necessarily like. Maybe you've got to
Yeah.
start eating a certain way, maybe got to start going to bed earlier than you want to. You have to be an adult and we
Yeah.
have to be professional, and this stuff has crept into esports, and you it's obvious the benefits, right? That it doesn't need any kind of healthcare professional to tell you that eating a general kind of healthy diet, sleeping more,
All
all of
right.
these things are better for you, right? It doesn't take any kind of doctor to tell you this stuff. Um, but when there are parts of the job when it becomes a career that aren't necessarily as desirable as just having fun playing the game with your friends, right? So, yeah, it's really bringing that into. I guess we can't try to take care of some of the stuff that's less desirable for players. Players don't want to trawl through pages and pages of contracts. Players don't
Yeah.
really want to have to deal with this. They want to play the game as much as they can and get as good as they can. And good agents can allow a lot of that as possible while having a close line of communication with the player, so that the player is very clued up on what's going on in their career and what's happening. We don't do anything without the player's kind of input, but it's ensuring that the player can really focus on what's really important to them, which is becoming the best League of Legends player in my particular instance, or whatever game that they're looking at, while we take care of the rest.
Yeah. So more to move in towards, let's say, the coaching direction.
Mm.
So what you say, like I also do a little bit of coaching on the side with the player management, and I know what the players go through, and I know because of your experience, 7 years of being a coach and been through a lot. So you have seen a lot, heard a lot, etc. All these stories around you within the esports scene. So what would you say like is something that you really take away to help other players as a coach with 7 years of experience? What is, let's say, your thing that you can provide that for these players in through your managing agency, or that you did in, let's say, the last couple of years in
Sure.
your coaching career?
Yeah. So I think that the first thing is, because of my experience, buy-in is really easy.
Mm,
So players will, if I was just a kind of general businessman or whatever, and I understood contract law very well, and that was kind of my forte, then I think players would obviously use me for that. But the coaching side, if I tried to start telling them like, this is how you can play the game, this is how you can be better, this is how you can be better in the team environment and such, they wouldn't. Even if I was giving the exact same advice of what I currently would give, I wouldn't necessarily get the same results. And the
right.
reason I get those results is because of the experiences that I've had, and they know that I've been on the route that they're currently going through to get to where they want to go to. I've worked through the European Regional League system in League of Legends, playing in different leagues or coaching in different leagues,
Mm,
in Spain, in Turkey, in the UK. All the way up to the LEC level, which is ultimately where lots of my players are trying to get to, so that they understand that I've actually taken that journey and gone through that and know what it takes to get there. They feel, that they feel more at ease trusting me with knowledge of how I got there, and how they're more willing to ask for my advice when it comes to, what do you think I should do in this situation? Because they know that I know what it's like in a team, what it's like to be living with the teammates, what it's like
mm,
to be, dealing with conflict within the confines of a team or whatever. So I think that helps me a lot, and I think that's a big part about where ICM Stellar was interested in working with me and picking me up as kind of their head League of Legends agent, is because that's something I possess that's not easy to necessarily just have out of a normal agent. Um, I
yeah.
think, yeah, I think it's a unique part to our department that other agencies might not necessarily be able to give that kind of advice, because I'm someone who's been around teams for years and years, as we said, around 7 years,
Yeah.
in different countries, in different cultures, working with players from all over Europe and all over the world. Actually, even in the LEC, I was working with Korean players and stuff. So,
Cool.
it's really kind of bringing that together to I mean, there's a huge range of different advice I give based on the player's situation, but I think having someone there that's impartial and not got a bias,
Yeah, what I
is
see a
beneficial.
lot, what I see a lot, let's say, in your answer is like because you've been, let's say, on the road of, let's say, semi-professional towards, let's say, LEC level, let's say
Yes.
world stage,
Hmm.
um, you became more than a coach. Just took some notes, and it came over to me also what you're doing right now with your player management, let's say, agency, is like you leveled up from a coach towards, let's say, being as well as a mentor. Like
Sure.
you help them with your experience, like how you should do this, or like don't do dumb shit, or
Yeah.
you should go this way, don't do that, but you go that. It's
I
not
think
not really a coach thing. The coach is, you revolved around the game, but you're really connecting with their ambitions and their human higher selves.
I think for the coaches that are listening to this podcast, I think that is how you evolve as a coach. You cannot, as a coach, you have more than a duty to just be able to basically impart game knowledge on players in front of
100%.
you, right? And I think one, you need skills to be able to put your arm around someone who needs it and lift them up. You need skills to be able to stand there and be a stern disciplinary figure and say, look, this isn't acceptable, this isn't on. This is really part of the coaching side where you have to understand your audience. You have to understand the players you're dealing with, understanding how they best take criticism, understand how they best take praise. Some people shy away from both of those. Some people really embrace both of those. How are these players? How are the players kind of motivated? How do you get them motivated? And what do you need from your players? And I think it's assessing the situation
Mm.
that's the skill, right? It's some people, the first step is actually being able to do all those things, being able to stand there in front of a player and say, look, this is not acceptable, and
Yeah.
vocalize your thoughts. So the other part is showing that compassion or empathy, where you can put your arm around someone and say, look, come on, it's going to be all right. Tomorrow's a new day. Today was a bad day. Tomorrow we're going to smash it, or whatever. But then the second one is actually evolving from that. Even is recognizing when the right time is to do each, and that's a skill once again. But that's definitely something that I've transferred into my agency work now, and I've
Yeah.
carried on, that I learned through kind of my coaching time. Yeah, and I mean, possibly we'll talk about it, but even pre coaching League of Legends and esports, I've got a degree in teaching, so my
All right.
background
Cool.
stems from
Nice.
teaching and traditional sports coaching. I used to do a bit of football coaching, so it's a blend of different things that I've kind of merged together to create what I see myself as a coach, and have taken with me, and mold. I mean, you never stop molding these things. These things they never stand still. I mean, that's again another coaching thing. But you cannot. You're a life as soon as you commit to a lifetime or a career of teaching anyone anything, whether that's coaching, teaching. You are a lifelong learner. You're committing to that. You can never know enough, and you can never stop being open to learning new things.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I totally agree. And also with the things and the way you approach, let's say, the coaching level, that you have to be more than only interested in the coach. I got a teacher degree myself as well, primary school as well,
Yeah,
and
sure.
with some young adults. So it's not only, definitely, especially there, it's so obvious. Like, you need the relation first in order to get the results right, especially in the classroom. So I
Absolutely.
really, let's say, connect with you on that level, by really you need to look at the person, the individual as a whole being, like holistically,
Yes.
in order to, let's say, touch them, like not in a physical way,
Yeah.
but
No.
more or
Yeah.
less
To
spiritual
be
way,
able to
like,
have that connection where you're able to give a piece of advice that someone else could give, but
right.
your advice is really taken on board because of that buy-in that you've generated with the connection that you've got with that person.
Yeah, 100%. So, when you had your teacher's degree and your little bit of, let's say, experience in traditional sports, what were some, let's say, obstacles that you had to work through as a, let's say, starting off coach 7 years ago? Take us back, and what are some hurdles that you have to come over? Like, oh, I know the teaching part, I know a little bit of coaching part, but I still need to find my way into online environment,
Sure.
esports and culture. What are some hurdles that potential new or beginner coaches can take away from you?
Um, yeah, sure. So there was definitely physical hurdles in the sense of I grew up and live on a farm in the south of southwest of England,
Old
and
McDonald.
effectively old McDonald, yes. And because of that, internet has been very poor. Online capabilities have been very poor, so that's a physical hurdle for sure that I just had to push through with, and just not ever let it stand in my way really until I was able to kind of sort that. Um, the other hurdles were kind of some of the stuff we've been speaking about, the getting the buy-in in the first place, right? Because let's talk League of Legends. I was never, and I've never been, a particularly high level League of Legends player, but I'm trying.
Yeah.
I'm coming in and I'm basically telling players who are significantly better than me at the game how to be better at the game.
Right.
And before you're a known name, before you have that buy-in, it is difficult for players to be able to go, okay, I'm going to let this guy tell me what to do, even though I know he's worse than me at the game.
Yeah.
And I think back then, especially, there wasn't so much value. It was a very naive industry, and I mean it still is to lots of extents. But it being back in kind of 2014 or something like this, we're talking about now. The industry was very much like who's best at the game is the best player, and the best coach
Right.
is the best the player who just
Very
plays
black and
better.
white. Like, oh, you're
Exactly.
good or you suck. Like,
And the best coach is the person who tells you the most things about the game that you didn't know, not actually how
yeah,
they can help you develop and help you learn and
exactly.
really engage your brain into a different way of thinking. So the skills that were perceived by players anyway, the skills that were kind of valued as a coach back then were very different. And it's taken a long time to kind of break that mold to actually see that the skills that can create a culture, an environment where everybody is pushing towards that same goal. Conflicts are resolved healthily. It's healthy to have conflict within a team, and just someone who is best able to bring 5 players together, or however many players are in your esport together, to become something stronger than just the sum of the 5 parts. And yeah, so a hurdle was definitely trying to get players to buy in to listening to someone who had less less ability at the game, less mechanical ability at the game for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess the other hurdle, which just takes time, is being able to network and know the right people to get to the places which to open up opportunities, to open up doors in front of yourself. I think word of mouth is always a great one, right?
Mm.
Being recommended highly by people you've worked with and such is a great one. But to do that, you've got to work with people whose word of mouth means something. So I,
Yeah.
I think it takes a lot of time. There is no I start coaching and I'm going to be playing at Worlds in 6 months or anything like this. I think sometimes it feels a little unfair if you're a coach that's not come from a playing background, because that process takes a lot longer. If you were a player and you played at a really high level, it's much easier to just be like, I'm a coach now, even though there's
Yeah.
some examples of that where they're actually going. I can almost tell they're really going to be awful coaches, because the skills that
Mm.
they have are knowledge of the game and not knowledge of people and how to develop people. So even if they're able to impart the
Exactly.
right knowledge, they're not able to impart they're not able to get their point across in a different way that someone else may understand them rather than what they understand.
Yeah.
So
Is that also a mistake? Let's say, I would say it's also accountable, or hold the organizations accountable, like the managers,
sure,
or let's say the owners that don't understand what is needed. Like,
yeah.
being successful as a player or successful in one role, no matter in like in day-to-day life or business,
Hmm.
doesn't mean you will be successful in another role. And it's so vastly different in what kind of toolbox you bring
Yeah,
towards the team.
and I think it's the naivety again of going back to the, sometimes the picture in the head of management or whoever is hiring the coach is who knows the most about the game, because that's obviously the best coach, when that's not accurate. That
For
just isn't
sure.
accurate at all. Sometimes, and that's not to say that good players can't become good coaches, because we've seen in traditional sports as well as esports that can be the case, but it is not the ability to play the game which makes you a good coach. There
Mm,
are other qualities, there are other skills. There's a huge whole kind of skill set that you need to be a top end coach for sure.
yeah, for sure. So that is interesting. So maybe we should, let's say, grab our scuba dive gear and dive a little bit deeper on that, because you're touched upon like, oh, between good coaches, bad coaches. So for the coaches and other staff members that are listening, what makes a great coach? Like you're having the examples, like having the people skills and different tools, but what are those tools? What are the things? How to connect? How do you develop, let's say, sort of the Fingerspitzgefühl, the emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
um, to connect with the players, to get the buy-in, to move further and deeper with them, to make good impact on the team.
I think a common error that I will see uh, that a lot of coaches, when they're very enthusiastic right at the starts of their careers, go in and make is that they will talk 3 times as much as they will listen, and it really has to
Mm,
be the opposite. I think to gauge a situation in the best way possible is not to sprint into a situation and spout off all of the things that you know. It's actually
right.
to let the room, let the environment tell you what's going on, and then you make calculated decisions. I mean, you can pre-plan a session, and you can go into the kind of team environment, and you can start going through it and through it and through it. But you get to the end of the session, and you just spoke for an hour, and
Yeah.
you don't even you have no idea at that point of how engaged the team were, or whether they actually got anything you've just said. It's better to take 3 hours to do it, but actually to be able to voice that in different ways, to get that across in different ways. And a lot of that comes from listening. And even if you disagree with the point of view of someone you're listening to, the fact that you understand and know their point of view is what
Right.
gives the coach the power to make the accurate decision. So I think the biggest piece of advice that I would say on trying to become more more well-rounded as a coach is listen twice as much as you talk. And I'm a very student-led coach. My kind of philosophy is very pupil student-led, um, when I or player-led in coaching terms in esports. um, so I will often take a lot of opinion and then scramble that back into a message I want to convey to the team, rather
Right.
than have my own personal message that I will just impart on the players in front of me. It's a Mine is a collection of I need to understand the way they're thinking to be able to get the situation to a resolved state. Because if I don't do that, I'm just brushing over their thoughts, their concerns, their feelings for one another, how they feel about me, how they feel about the game, or whatever the situation is that we're talking about. If I'm brushing over that, I'm really missing the point as to what we're trying to resolve here.
Yeah, 100%. Like this, that is also a good thing. At least what I also say about the coaching, because I recognize it a lot. They want to spread their knowledge, they want to solve problems. They are basically a fireman, like dousing
Yeah,
out fires everywhere. But what are actually doing? Like everyone unconsciously, in my opinion, becomes lazy because you only provide them solutions from your perspective, or like,
yes,
okay, thank you, they become lazy, they stop thinking from themselves.
yeah.
So always
You're
better to,
removing that from them almost.
yes,
You're basically saying, go in and make this mistake as many times as you want because I'll put it out each time, as opposed to, okay, how do we not get into this situation next time? What can I give you as a coach? What kind of skill set can I give you as a coach so that if the initial stages of this situation arise next time, how do we come to a different resolution down the line? So when this moment kind of occurs, because it will again, if there was a conflict that arose in a team, if there was something that arose in a team, it's very likely that it didn't just happen once and that's it, and it's something that's brewing over time more often, and you often get a kind of an explosion at some point. But it's how can we address the situation to best ensure that when you feel like that next time, that this is actually the actions that you're going to take rather than the ones that we took this time.
right,
Yeah,
help them evolve the situation,
yeah.
like involve them,
You want to
basically
give
is,
them the
is the key
toolkit, not
word.
build the house. And
Yeah.
that's the point. I mean, you can go in there and you can do things for them, but you may as well then just take the keyboard and mouse and play the game yourself. Ultimately, what you want them to do is be able to
Yeah.
problem solve, to be able to have the toolkit, whether that's a kind of a psychological toolkit or a physical toolkit, to to be able to best deal with whatever situation that they find, whether that's in the team environment, whether that's in the context of problem solving within a game. You're trying to not give them the answers. So there's A, which is the question. There's C, which is the answer. What you're trying to provide as a good coach is B, which is how do you get from A to C, you know,
Yeah.
and not just give them C every time, because you give them C every time, like you said, players become lazy. They become,
Yeah.
okay, well, I have no idea what I'm doing, but the coach will give me the answer after the game because
Yeah.
he'll tell me what we should have done.
Yeah, and the next
Y-
time, after 5 times you're giving them solutions, they're like, "Coach, can you help me?" And then mm,
yeah,
basically the whole development stagnates, and then you have 3 months like of season, well,
yeah.
sort of wasted, basically.
Yeah, like did we get anywhere? Well, I know the answer to that problem that arose
Yeah,
55 times, but I still know the same answer as I knew week one, than
exactly.
rather than actually
It's
how
hard.
I should deal with that situation, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It doesn't really click that way. So, also, Josh, so within your 7 years of being a coach, what are some of, let's say, the key moments in your career where it took off, or it was, let's say, it went downhill, or like, oh, there was a, let's say, a dark moment, and how did
Sure.
you, let's say, worked through that period, the good, the bad, the ugly? What were, let's say, key moments in your career as an esports coach? Say, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Um, I think so. We'll start with good as a highlight. Making the LEC. So, I don't, anyone who doesn't know kind of my story on that sense, most coaches just get kind of they play really well and they get picked up by an LEC team. XL,
Yeah,
the team that I coached in the LEC, was not an LEC team prior to us getting them there. We were competing in the UK scene, or in the UK league, and applied for the LEC, which there was almost no chance that XL should get an LEC spot based on the size of the organization against
yeah,
the teams that we were competing against, and everything. And I wrote the kind of performance side and coaching philosophy side of the LEC application for XL, and we, on an off chance, got the spot and felt extremely proud of what we'd worked towards and how this organization had gone from nothing. People who don't know the backstory of XL, it was literally 4 or 5 years ago now. It was just an idea between two brothers in a pub somewhere. They had a
yeah,
chat and they said, "I want to start an esports org." They weren't like multi-millionaires that started this org or anything like that. They were just two brothers
yeah,
who were at university. They started an esports organization, and did it right. They were clever about it. They got the right people involved. They were cautious. They didn't blow all their money right at the start. They got
exactly.
the right partners on board. It took a lot of time, but ultimately they got to where they wanted to, which was the LEC. So the proud moment was one, that, and two, me being given the job as head coach to run that org in its inception into the LEC. It would have been easy for XL at that time to say, look, we need an LEC experienced coach, someone who's been there before, someone who's been there for years, but they entrusted in me to take that role on. I guess this kind of leads on to the darker side of things, which was, um, in that time we had an idea about, XL was very new to the LEC. It was, its kind of inception. It didn't
Mm,
have. I mean, we got into the LEC really late. Didn't have any players, so we needed a main team and an academy team. We had to sign 10 players. We didn't really have any of the staff infrastructure, so I had to find other coaches. I had to find analysts. We had to find all the staff in a really short time. There needed to be a accommodation and training facility in London, which we currently didn't have. We needed a training facility in Berlin, which we currently didn't have. So, between all these things, we had about 2.5 months to try and get as much of this together as possible. So uh, it was a tough
tough.
challenge, and I spent a lot of the first split putting out fires, trying to, one, we had to try and convince good enough players to join XL in the LEC, which you had the LEC spot to sell, but a lot of these players were wanted by other LEC teams, so it's not like you're
Yeah,
competing with
like,
teams that
who is
aren't there.
XL? I want to be
Yeah,
G2. I
I
want to
don't know
be
who XL
Fnatic.
is exactly,
Yeah, yeah.
and
I don't want
what
to be
what could
number
I
10
sell to
team.
them? Like I could sell to them. Obviously, they don't like. I had to sell my coaching philosophy and my vision for XL, which the players ultimately that we signed bought into, but I also ended up making a load of what weren't meant to be, but happened to be kind of empty promises because I was hoping certain things like a training facility and such were going to be up and
Mm.
running by X amount of time. But I wasn't, they were out of my control, and I was not in a position to be able to say,
Yeah.
like, these are the things I'm promising, but ultimately they're on someone else's hands as to how soon they happen or when they happen and such. And I don't think that personally, I mean, I got 6 months or whatever it was, I got a split to try and get things into gear, but I probably had my worst split uh, as an actual coach in what was probably the most important split in my career at that point, because of what
Mm.
I felt was kind of putting out fires all around me that weren't necessarily anything to do with me or the team,
So
and
you
I
didn't
needed to be
really had,
focused
let's
on the
say
team.
that yeah, well, yeah, exactly, the focus.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I know a couple of coaches as well. Like they have their focus on so many things, or like in the day to day life, or they have to think about this and then that, and then the player has a story, or I don't know, a girlfriend breakup, and you have to be everywhere.
yeah,
But at at the end of the day, you are, let's say, responsible for that team and the
yeah.
performance at the end, and it's hard to juggle all those balls at the same time, and
No,
sometimes you have to
exactly.
drop some things, and that is what you're saying, like, okay, that was something, I juggled too many balls.
Yeah, I think there was too much going on in a too short space of time, and I
Mm,
feel personally I felt like we all knew there would be too much going on in too short space of time. And at the start of the split, when before we'd had any results, before the split had started, it was okay. We understand that this is going to take 12 months to be able to get into place and so on. But when investors put serious money in and they see results perhaps not go the same way as they imagined, or perhaps, and again, these are people that we're talking about that just have money and they don't know anything about the game or
yeah,
the
yeah,
processes.
yeah.
They're putting the money into the team. They didn't They saw other teams like G2 or Fnatic or really established teams in the league doing really well, and we were fighting to basically not come 10th. We ultimately came ninth. We didn't come 10th, but um, the benchmark changed dramatically from, look, just do better second split than you do first split, to by the end of the first split, actually, we're going to have to let you go because the team performance is not good enough, even though you're juggling a million things at once. So that became a dark bit. I guess uh, probably something helpful for other coaches. I guess during that time, because I felt like I was dealing with loads of different things. Like I was moving away from my home to the team, as well as
Right.
making sure the whole team's in the right place, making sure they're okay, making sure that the promises that we've kind of promised them as to why they're going to join this team are upheld. Or loads of different various things, dealing with visa issues for Korean players and
I
such.
feel the pressure from here.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
feel it
And
like that's a lot. Like
there was a
if you're
lot
in
going
as a
on
coach and
at
you
the
have to
time.
move and you have to do all those, let's say, paperwork, and have
Yeah,
to talk and build that relationship with the team and put in quality scrim time and development and all the
and
individual
then if the
attention.
team doesn't
Like,
do well, it's all your fault, even though there's another 25 people involved,
yeah,
um ultimately. But that's the responsibility that you suffer as when you get one of these head coach roles, right? And that's part of it. I think there could have been more support potentially, and I think um people now would look back and probably agree. But ultimately, that what was the high of getting into the LEC very quite quickly became a low of, we're going to replace you. And this was an organization that I'd worked with for probably about 3 years at that point, and
yeah.
felt like that wouldn't ever be the case, that they would just replace me uh, off the cuff. It was a very quick kind of last second decision that occurred. Um, and I guess something that would be valuable to other coaches that potentially listen to this that may have kind of felt somewhat the same, or may
Mm,
go through something similar, is imposter syndrome. And I felt a bit of
right.
this. And anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's like feeling like you're not good enough for the role almost, or feeling like you got here not of your own merit, but you got here for whatever reason. And I think I look back now and it was kind of silly, but I felt like at the time, because there was so much going on, I felt a bit like, I questioned a lot of, is my ability good enough to be at this level? And
Mm,
I,
right.
I think in hindsight, I've got a bit older, I've got a bit wiser, and I think I was fine, but I should have taken hold of the reins a little bit more and done it my way, as opposed to, because I was feeling like that at the time, I kind of just I probably took a little bit too much of a step back while trying to deal with a million things. And it, people always say in traditional sports, right? If you're going to manage a football club or something like this, manage it, but manage it your way because everybody gets sacked in the end. And I kind of didn't let myself do that so much,
Right.
and I should have taken the reins and imparted myself more on that job than perhaps I did. So
Yeah,
definitely
I
another
think
thing.
it's interesting what you just said, because I see that quite commonly across, let's say, esports coaches that has, let's say, increasing pressure of, let's say, the personal life or within the team, like the results are sometimes a bit lacking or whatever the reason may be, and instead of, let's say, stepping up and, let's say, pedal to the metal, or is that the phrase? Let's say,
Hmm.
to step forward, they step back and more let things happen. Let's say because it's just like too much. Let's say
Yeah,
for their mental to control everything, because they feel like they feel responsible for everything that is going on. But how would you say would let's say be a summary would be like, okay, pick your battles. Like, you cannot win everything, and then do it. Let's say, uh, I do now one, two, three things today, or like this week. This is what I'm focused on. This
yeah.
is where I'm gonna put my energy, and not like try to keep everybody happy. But because I cannot. I have responsibilities. I have really, let's say, have that pulling in the reins, directive performance.
Yeah, and I think the other thing for me in that particular instance was, and advice I give to other people, if you're ever having a staff team for a project, ensure that all staff are pulling in the right direction, and that direction be the direction they're led in by the kind of leadership group, and they'll have
Yeah,
your back no matter what. Because I think perhaps in my time there, I had some people from old Excel, I'll say, like pre-LEC Excel, which were people that I'd almost handpicked, that I knew very well, and even if they didn't necessarily agree with the point I was making to the team, or to the owners or whatever, they would support me and then talk to me privately after and say, actually, I think we should have done this instead, as
yeah.
opposed to when you have it's like the child that goes to mum and asks like for chocolate, and then mum says
Go
no,
to
and
your
then he
dad.
goes to dad,
Yeah.
and dad says, well, what does your mum say? Like if they're
Yeah.
working as a cohesive unit, even if one
Yeah.
didn't care if the child has chocolate, then then it's a much stronger front. Whereas I think at the time, we signed some coaches under me and such, and some staff around me that had previous experience but weren't willing to sacrifice any thoughts for the sake of the greater good of being a team, a cohesive unit of staff.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's another good thing. I think where the responsibility became massive, that could have been eased by everyone pulling in the same direction. But I think there was some people there that were happy to see me struggle, for instance, at certain points, because they may get promoted to the head coach, possibly. Maybe that was a motive
Yeah.
behind some of it. But again, I think really pick the staff, the people that you've got around you, the support network, both kind of outside of work as well as the actual staff that you're working with. When you have a good connection with them, and I guess this is why in traditional sports you'll see more often, if a manager gets fired, for instance, his whole team of staff go with him often to the next team, and this is something I think should and will probably become more common in esports as time go on, because
Yeah.
it's shared values, it's shared philosophy,
Package
it's
deals.
cohesiveness. Yeah, absolutely. And I think getting those people around you. I had one particular who's now gone on to coach in the LFL in France. He's coaching Solari, John Ellis, who was
Hmm.
basically my assistant for the whole duration. Who is a brilliant coach, and is showing that now as a head coach level. But when we work together, it always felt like you've got that support, and having that is invaluable, really. No matter what team you're at, no matter where you're at, having people around you, like-minded people around you that are willing to stand up and say, I think you were wrong there. Actually, we should have done it this way, but also will
Yeah.
support you as a united front in front of the team or in front of the players, is a really, really important thing to have.
Yeah. I 1000% agree on that. And I think that is a good piece of information as well. Let's say for the coaches out there to find the right people around you. Because for me personally, there are not many people that you can really, let's say, really connect with. Let's say that you can share your same philosophy, your same vision out of
Hmm.
coaching, etc. With. So if you have that, also try to nourish it. And I believe maybe it's not 100%, let's say, waterproof, but I would say like people that share with you when things go bad, or when they can give honest feedback to you, but also, let's say, when things go good for you or either way,
Hmm.
that they also support you and are happy for you. Like
Yeah.
it works two
Yeah.
ways.
No.
Oftentimes
Absolutely.
you find the people that can give you feedback, but sometimes they don't, let's say, really support you or are happy for you when you're going places or whatever. Then it's like,
Yeah.
oh, then you see the different change. And if you have that combination, I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, and to be clear, I think what you don't want is a cheerleader. You don't want someone stood by the sidelines that just praises
No.
everything you do, but you need someone to big you up when you're doing the right thing, and the right thing by the team. I mean, not necessarily by yourself. And you're also when you're doing the wrong thing, will also stand in and say, actually, look, I think this is the way we should have approached that, and in the future we should approach it like this. And because you have that connection, you feel like you can listen to that person, even perhaps even if their physical position within the team or the organization is perhaps lower than yours in the hierarchy, quote unquote, or
Yeah,
whatever. They can
exactly.
still say to you, actually, I think you were wrong here. This is the way we should have approached that situation. And you can come to again, going back to what I said right at the start, you're a lifelong learner as a coach. And if you're not willing to be able to adopt your approach, to kind of change how you're going to do things, to listen to other people's way of doing things, and then taking bits from that, bits from other coaches, and merging it together, create your own philosophy, I think you're probably in the wrong career.
Yeah, 100%. Always be open. I Let's say always be invested, not only interested in coaching, like only on the
Mhm.
game. You need to be fully invested holistically, look for different perspectives all the time. So yeah, good stuff, Josh. So we're all almost talking for I believe, let's say 45 minutes. Time
Sure.
flies like, I don't know,
Yeah.
Star Wars spaceships. It flies
In
by.
light speed.
Yeah, light speed for sure. So um is there perhaps your maybe one huge shiny gold nugget that you want to, let's say, give towards the esports coaches and perhaps other staff that is listening? What would you say, like, if they want to become successful, this is the thing that I would love that everyone would basically a get a, I don't know, a podcast on, or let's say that they
Sure.
know from the beginning, the first time a coach comes in, like, I want to know how to become a good coach. What would you say? What is that core biggest gold nugget?
I think, I mean, there's no tips, tricks, secrets, right? It, there's a lot of just
True.
the core principles of working hard and make sure you just keep working. But I think the biggest thing that I would give, that perhaps at times I didn't feel like doing, were to embrace failure. You know,
Mm,
maybe you consider failure being sacked from the current team. Maybe you consider failure not reaching playoffs with the team that was meant to reach playoffs. But I think embracing the fact that occurred, and not letting that dis- demotivate you or dissuade you from continuing on your career path, um, is such a key thing to be able to get to where you want to. Because everybody who's ever got anywhere in anything had to fail a significant amount of times before they got there. No, like when you start your career, you think, I'm going to coach this lower team, and then I'm going to get onto a better team, and then I'm going to get onto a better team, and I'm going to work my way up to
yeah.
world championships. But you go up and you come back down a little bit, and maybe you have to go sideways a little bit, and then you go back up. But what you can't do is, on the way up, you hit a stumbling block or a team where something becomes really difficult, and maybe you don't deal with it in the right way, and in hindsight you would have dealt with it differently. But ultimately it ends up in you getting the sack,
Right.
or ends up in your players saying, look, we want to replace our coach, or whatever it may be. um, the worst thing you can do is go, "Oh, okay, I give up, and I'm not doing anymore." You know,
Right.
you have to just hit that block. Maybe you got to take a couple of steps down, but you have to be humble about that. You can't be like, because I've been at this level, I don't deserve to be coaching at a lower level, or whatever. Coaching's coaching, and the biggest reward you will get from coaching is not money. It is not a job necessarily. It is the reward of seeing progress with the people you work with. Whether that's as a player, whether that's as a person. For me, more as a person, seeing people achieve what they set out to achieve, and knowing the story of what hardship they've gone through to get to where they want to get to, for me is the most rewarding thing in the industry. So yeah, embrace the moments of failure, because ultimately those are the ones that teach you the most about getting success in the future.
Yeah, beautifully. I totally agree. So that was a huge nugget, and I believe like esports coaches kind of understand this, but when they're confronted with it, they don't really embrace it. Like they try to fight it, or like especially like with the ego, like I want to push it away, or like do I really want to do that? Some coaches quit, some few
Yeah.
coaches push on, or some people they bounce back, but then like, oh, that was my ceiling, so I want to be here, so I'm always, let's say, 100% in my element, and
Mm.
they don't really want to push through. So yeah, just like you want to skip steps, but you can't. Basically,
No,
you
yeah.
have to put
I
in.
mean, uh, to be clear, me too, right? So there's been times where I've quote unquote failed in my mind, and I felt like, is this really worth it? You know,
Yeah,
is all this stress, all this hassle really worth it? Is and the issue that we have in esports perhaps is that logistically, it's quite hard to take those steps and continue what you're doing, because I don't know, say you're in the LEC, you're earning a very high amount of money, you're logistically able to pay for your bills, your housing, whatever you need to do.
yeah,
But if you drop down to a couple of levels, it doesn't take very many levels drop down to be like, I'm not even earning a full-time wage that I'd earn as a cashier in a local shop,
yeah, for
or something
sure.
like this. There's a huge drop off in dropping those levels, and sometimes the logistics can make it really, really difficult. I think as esports continues to develop, we will see a smoother curve for the rungs. The grassroots will still be very low earners, but it will be progressive all the way up to the
Yeah,
highest echelons of play and such. So when you drop down slightly, okay, I'm earning a bit less. I'm on a team with less exposure. I'm on a team with um, less resources, but ultimately, it's still a career path that I can partake on. So sometimes that is difficult, but just don't give up. Put yourself in a position where you constantly learn. You're willing to learn from your mistakes. You're willing to embrace that failure and keep pushing forward.
yeah, beautifully. So what I would like to do in this podcast series, that I have some couple of guests already, let's say, in line, that are coming up. So the next one is a performance coach of Counter Logic Gaming, uh, Ursula Klimchak. So I will speak to her soon. So maybe do you have a question for, let's say, a performance coach, how she looks at like the esports playing field, or something that you want to ask her, in order to, let's say, trigger something in her brain, like, oh, this is a good or interesting question, to get someone else's perspective on a subject, even though you have your own perspective, but to see like, hey, what do you think about this could be interesting.
Um, I guess. Hmm. So, I've been a bit advocate for performance coaches. I guess throughout my career, perhaps more so than some of the more traditional esports coaches, I'll call them, because within my philosophy, I kind of developed a model that was similarly based around a kind of grassroots model of football that in England, the FA four corner model, which was called the four tower model, which
Hmm.
which looked at a more holistic process kind of driven coaching style than perhaps some esports coaches have gone for before, where the four pillars for me were technical, so the ability to play the game to a really high level, physical, social, and psychological, and the physical and social and psychological are sometimes missed by esports coaches.
Yeah,
Um, and they often focus very much on the technical ability to play the game to a high level, but the other bits were missed. I think I guess the issue that people have within each of those sectors is that often a performance coach, I mean, nobody can be a master of any of those, right? There's sports psychologists, which are very good at the psychological side of things. There's nutritionists and personal trainers and such
right.
that can be very knowledgeable about the physical side of things. And then there's people that are just very good at kind of the team building side, or bringing out the social aspects of being a team and uniting together, and lots of these people have crossover skills. But I think the criticism of performance coaches as a term is that it is often been that I guess some have portrayed themselves as master of all of those, and
Yeah.
it, it's hard. It's a hard one to get around. But I think what performance coaches do brilliantly, and what mine did when working with me, was brought in specialists where needed and was responsible for bringing in those specialists as well as imparting their own knowledge or their own specialism on the team,
Right.
for to ensure that not just the technical tower for my teams was on point, but actually there was the physical tower and the importance of that, and demonstrating the importance of that to the players, um, and then the social and the psychological as well. Uh, a question for a performance coach, though, that I'd be interested in is, I guess, what if they had to pinpoint something, what do they think that within the kind of performance coach role has the biggest has had the biggest impact on the team's growth? Because I think
Right.
a lot of the time, just being a bit healthier or just sleeping a little bit more, they have incremental benefits. They
For
absolutely
sure.
do, and they are super important in the longevity of these players' careers and their performance. But I think there are so many issues with the way that players train and practice, and the scheduling, and the way things work, the way they're enabled to practice by the game developers and such, the information that they have access to around their replays and around game various things, that it would be interesting to know from a performance coach's point of view if there was something that they felt had the biggest impact on the teams that they work with, in particular, one
Yeah.
particular kind of facet of their work that had the most impact.
Yeah, for sure. Good question. Great question. So I will speak to the performance coach very soon.
Great,
So that will be a great question that I can ask her, and you'll have your answer soon enough, and
brilliant.
as well for the others as well. So a little bit of continuation. So Josh, if people want to connect with you, have some more questions from your player agency or like your experience as a coach, some things, hurdles to share stories or to connect with you in any way, where can they find you on your social media channels?
Sure. So the main one professionally is my Twitter, and that is at ICM Stellar underscore Josh. And that my DMs are open, my direct messages are open. Please feel free to message me. Any kind of comments or anything like that around this podcast or around anything I've spoken about, or if you want any advice on you're going through a particular time in your coaching journey at the moment, or as a player, or you want to talk about the agency side of things, all of these things I'll always be as receptive to as possible, about helping people that have either been in similar situations to what I was once in, or even various different situations that I may not have experienced, but actually have been around other people who've experienced, or could give you advice on the industry in general. So, yeah, always free over at Twitter.
Perfect. Super awesome for your availability. So all of the links will be down in the description below. So be sure to follow as well, Josh. Just like to support and to follow his chatting and also his thoughts on the Twitter timeline. Always interesting and important, of course.
Brilliant.
So Josh, yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I really love the talk. I felt like I could talk for 3 more hours, and
Yeah,
then we still be learning about experiences, about coaches, players, because everything is so interesting. So maybe later on a different podcast only about, let's say, the player management part, or about the coaches. So I believe anyone has still a couple of questions that they would like to ask you, so be sure to keep your DMs open. But I will be sure to send some people over you if they are
yeah,
looking for
please
any
do.
help.
Please do.
All right. So thank you very much. And that is it, guys, for the first episode of the Next Level Esports Podcast, the number one podcast for esports coaches and team development to help you and your team reach that next level by getting the people side of esports right. If you like this episode, let us know and spread the word. Smash that like and share and subscribe button. Tell your staff, players, friends, and family. If you want more things to help you reach the next level, you can go to the Next Level Esports Discord or go to the Next Level Esports YouTube channel for more content found in the description below. Find us as well on Twitter at next_L_esports. And once again, let us know what you think of this episode. Thank you so much, Josh, to kick this very first podcast off, historical, of course, right? And for you who is listening, I hope that you also are tuned in for the next podcast. And thank you all very much for listening. Bye bye.